Hello there. Good morning. Welcome in to Off the Edge Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama Crimson Tide Sports. Jacob Harrison here with you. Joe Gaither behind the board. Michael Bronner will be helping out as well. Great day to talk some Alabama football, and we'll do it for the next 56 minutes. Want to encourage you to download the Tide 100.9 app. It's your absolute best friend as a Crimson Tide fan. We got you covered wall to wall, both on the air and on the written side. Hot takes abound, news, analysis. It's all there for you at the Tide 100.9 app. Also want to encourage you to check out Alabama Vintage at Alabama VTG on the Instagram account. Check out what they've got new in stock and hold it for your own. Connect with the brand ambassadors, the NIL deals that have been struck there for 15% off your order at AlabamaVTG.com. Shoes, hats, commemorative T-shirts, the memorabilia that lines the wall. All of it can boost your fandom here with the Alabama Crimson Tide, as well as the vintage clothing that they've got in there. A plethora of things for you to choose from, both pro and for the Alabama Crimson Tide. Plenty to enjoy there at Alabama Vintage. Go check them out and see what Charlie's got in store for you there. So yesterday we learned that Nick Saban's not happy again. And it didn't have to do with Florida. Like, I'm still reeling over Florida. I watched the Florida game again today and just couldn't stop watching these linebackers be afraid of contact. Afraid. Like, there's no other explanation as to why Henry To'oTo'o is running backwards when he knows it's an option play, and there's no explanation for why Will Anderson was one of the guys that actually did his job. Why Christian Harris couldn't fill a gap in the running game, and through all of that, Nick Saban's not mad about the Florida game. It's once again how folks are doing their jobs in practice, or if they're doing their jobs in practice. And we'll listen to the opening comments from Nick Saban here in just a bit. But here's the thing for me is when I kind of see that Nick Saban's getting all bent out of shape about these things, and the one thing that he did that was really weird was saying, why doesn't everybody else play like Will Anderson? That's very, very out of character for him. He's usually the guy that's, if he doesn't really have something positive to say about a guy, then it's just coach speak. But if we're really at a point where, why aren't we acting like Will Anderson? That's a new one.
You don't think that's kind of weird? Why aren't we all acting like one of the biggest freak of natures? Why aren't we all playing like the one of the more special players we've all seen? Come on, why aren't we all just playing like? Why don't all quarterbacks just play like Tom Brady? Like,
right? Yeah.
Why don't they all be Peyton Manning?
Well, I think it's got more to do with the leadership than the play style. I mean, there's only one Will Anderson. I know on the broadcast, Brad Nessler kept saying, "How many 31s are out there?" It is just one. They only need one. That guy's a freak. He's an animal, and now he's learning that he's got to change the way that he approaches his leadership skills. And Nick Saban wants to see him do that, but also, like, before he's even done that, why isn't everybody else doing that too? Why do we have players who are afraid of contact? Why do we have players that don't want to practice to their full potential? Why do we have players that aren't respecting the opponents? Has kind of the mindset of some of the more ambitious folks in the fan base who've lost respect for winning. They're out there. Fans who have lost respect for winning. Go check the tapes. Your coach said don't do that. Josh Pate said something really funny. I don't know if y'all watched Late Kick with Josh, but you absolutely should. Said talk to your former selves from the 80s or the early 2000s and tell them about the Florida game the same way you've talked about it all week. We went into Florida. We went into the swamp. It was a hectic environment. We had a guy starting his first road SEC game as the quarterback, and we got out of there with a 31-29 win. And man, it was just ugly, and we don't know if we're going to repeat as champions. And he said, your former self would slap you in the face. Slap you right in the face. He ain't wrong. Josh Pate's usually not wrong, but he ain't wrong about that either. Like, respect for winning has to be incorporated. And I think that has a lot to do with the Bama standard too, because Nick Saban talks about it as this is a play-by-play by play attitude. We're not looking at scoreboards. We're not looking at who's on the roster, or excuse me, not on the roster sheet, maybe the roster sheet for the other team, but we're not looking at what logos on the schedule. We're going out there, we're playing a bunch of nameless gray faces, to steal a quote from Mike Tomlin. We're worried about ourselves and what we do to create value for ourselves by continuing to play excellent football. Let's hear what Coach had to say. The opening comments from Nick Saban last night. Michael, if you've got that ready, give me a thumbs up. The opening comments from Nick Saban last night, and he kind of lit into it. You could read it on his face the second that he stepped to the microphone. He wasn't too pleased with practice now that this team has to once again face a team it's expected to blow out in the Southern Miss Golden Eagles. Here's Nick Saban last night.
Yeah, well, we're trying to identify exactly what our passion is, what our spirit is. I think we've got a lot of really good guys on our team that have great character. They want to do the right things. They make pretty good choices and decisions, but passion is, what is your sense of purpose? What do you want to accomplish? What do you want to do long term in terms of the challenges of this season? And I think when you have a great sense of purpose, then you have a positive attitude about working every day, creating the right habits, doing the right things, and you have the right energy and enthusiasm to sustain intensity and do things at a high level and play to a standard all the time. So that's kind of the challenge for us in terms of what we want to do. We have a lot of respect for Southern Miss. I think they have a really good defensive team. They're ranked very high in the country. They've not given up very many points, and some of those points have been field position turnovers and pick sixes and things like that. So this is a very good team. And they're very athletic on offense. They have good skilled players. The quarterback is a very, very good athlete, even though he's a freshman and a young player. So we need to play to our standard. We need to do the things that we do well. It's always great to, play at Bryant-Denny Stadium, to be home. I'd like to, see our fans, have some passion and enthusiasm and energy for this team. And I think it would be helpful to them. So we've had a pretty good week. I think the players were really good today in terms of their focus and what they're trying to accomplish and what they're trying to do. So we're excited about the opportunity to have a game at home.
And later in the press conference, he's asked about the Bama standard. How do you define that, right? And he kind of goes into, like I said just a few minutes ago, this is a play-by-play situation. You tackle each play based on where you're at within the moment. You're not worried about external factors, and while those external factors will weigh in, you have to do what you're supposed to do. And I hear a lot of folks talking about NIL. Well, the NIL doesn't make you run backwards on a run play. NIL doesn't keep you from stuffing a gap. NIL doesn't keep you from committing pass interference. NIL doesn't determine whether or not you decide to block a guy in the hole or turn your attention somewhere else completely so that Brian Robinson gets tackled for a 4-yard loss. NIL doesn't determine whether or not you put your right foot down instead of your left foot to score a touchdown. That doesn't play a role when you're on the field. When you're on the field, the external factors are the crowd noise and the team in front of you. And as I've went into detail several times, Florida did their job a lot. Dan Mullen called excellent plays. Alabama apparently forgot how to defend the option in back-to-back weeks, and it's frustrating. It's incredibly frustrating. But at the same time, like, you can still look at this defense and say, well, they've got all this talent. They've got the athletes. Where's the leadership? Where's the leadership outside of Will Anderson on the defensive side of the ball? We're led to believe that it's Jordan Battle. We're led to believe that it's Henry To'o. We know Phil Mathis is a great leader, but he's very much an actions over words kind of guy too, despite having a bubbly personality and being very close with many guys on the team. Where is it coming from? Where is it coming from? And why is this taking a month and a half to resolve itself. This is a Nick Saban coach team. And I think it does go a little bit back to what Saban said on Hey Coach some time ago. Losing respect for winning. Losing respect for who is across from you. Yes, like I said, nameless gray faces are on the other side. We're not worried about the roster. We're not worried about what logo's over there, but go out there and respect whoever it is out there as if they're the best player on the planet, and that will keep you from playing down to their level or playing at their level if they're still not as good as you, because talent-wise, Alabama's better than everybody. But we don't play the games on paper. And thank goodness we don't, because that game in the Swamp was an incredible football game. But don't let my nature for being a football fan first make you believe that I don't understand the plights of these Bama fans right now. Because I understand the difficulty in going from absolute dominance on a regular basis to being in a space where everybody else has struggled on the field, and we're seem to be having these struggles off the field. Are we going to get caught by somebody who's well prepared and has that right offensive attack? And that's why so many Bama fans are overlooking Southern Miss and looking at Ole Miss next week and saying, well, that team can score points. Can we score enough to keep up with them, or can we prevent them from scoring so many points that we can't get out of it? And it's a valid question. It's a valid question. There's a reason I was so high on Ole Miss going into this season. If you mess around with Lane Kiffin's offense and you mess around with what the Rebels are bringing into Tuscaloosa in 2 weeks, and I'm not looking ahead. All of my content on Tide 100.9 today will have to do with Southern Miss. But I understand, because Ole Miss is dangerous. We'll talk with Joey Blackwell, beat writer for Bama Central, the Sports Illustrated affiliate of the Alabama Crimson Tide. Next, we'll get his thoughts on what Nick Saban said last night, the state of college football, and so much more next here on Off the Edge. Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama sports.
Did you know that United Healthcare helps connect you to doctors and therapists with 24/7 access to virtual care?
So I could have therapy from my couch?
Yep.
Or a doctor appointment from my car?
If you wanted to.
Wait, you're right. I don't even like when people see me sing in the car. Couch appointment it is. Virtual visits are just one of the ways United Healthcare helps connect you to better health. Learn more at uhc.com. Plan benefits may vary.
Don't miss a play at the Sportsbook at Pearl River Resort. Your front row seat to all the action. Place bets on all professional and most college sports at the counter, kiosk, or on your phone. Then catch the game on one of our 20 big screens from the comfort of the newly remodeled Timeout Lounge. Plus, the PRR Sports app gives you access to live, in-play sports betting. Sportsbook at Pearl River Resort. Be more than a fan. Be a player. Must be 21.
I need tech that can make me as productive in my home office as I am at my office.
It's possible with Staples Connect. How about a PC that'll help me get the most out of my day and my budget? Staples Connect makes it possible with the tools you need to work from anywhere. And now get up to $200 off select PCs, like the Lenovo IdeaPad 5i with Intel i5 processor. Explore what's new at your local Staples or staplesconnect.com. Staples Connect, the working and learning store. Ends 10/17. In-store only, limit 2.
Tide 100.9 Tuscaloosa weather.
But a beautiful day today. Nothing but sunshine. The humidity stays low. Tuscaloosa's high 75. Cool again tonight. Clear with the low at 50. Then for tomorrow and Saturday, the sky's sunny both days. The high tomorrow 80. Saturday's high at 83. I'm James Spann on the ABC 3340 Weather Center on Tide 100.9. It's 70 degrees in Tuscaloosa.
Follow Off the Edge on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube for live streams and instant analysis. Off the Edge with Jacob Harrison continues.
We're back here on Off the Edge, Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama Crimson Tide Sports. Jacob Harrison here with you up until noon. Joe Gaither behind the board, Michael Bronner helping out. We're going to go to the phone lines, welcome in our usual Thursday guest, Joey Blackwell, beat writer for Bama Central, the Sports Illustrated affiliate of the Alabama Crimson Tide. Joey, man, what is going on? How you doing?
Doing all right, Jacob. I'm in your neck of the woods today in Tuscaloosa. Going to be speaking to a journalism class in just a few minutes here. I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, you put you put old Saudry's class in their place and let them know what's coming.
All right. Will do. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. It seems like it hasn't been for Nick Saban lately either.
No, and that's where I want to go. Saban's always up front. He's never mad at the media for the questions that they ask. But man, he almost let Cecil have it last night, and then he let Casagrande have it. Questioning if any of us have played sports, and you were a multi-sport athlete. I was too. A couple other beat writers were as well. Innocent question about Jaleel Billingsley, but it kind of paints a broader stroke where Saban appears to just be in a frustrated state with his leadership and the attitudes of some of the guys that are on this team this year. So point blank, do you think that Alabama has a leadership problem in 2021?
On the surface, you see all these talented athletes that they have and the leadership. I think we've seen great leadership from players like Henry To'oTo'o. At least we've heard that from other players and Saban. Earlier on, we've seen leadership from Will Anderson on defense as well. We talk about the poise and leadership that Bryce Young has played with despite his young age. But, last night, or at least over the past couple of weeks, culminating in last night, Saban, kind of talked about how there seems to be a leadership issue. And he hasn't really said that outright, but, after you've covered him for a while, you can kind of glean that from some of the points he was making last night, talking about how, the question about Jaleel, for example, was talking about how, Jaleel's doing what he's supposed to be doing. He's making an impact, in regard to, why he wasn't starting to begin with. And he's been making those progressions. But, Saban said he's just been doing what he's supposed to be doing. And I think he's having that problem with a lot of players on the team. They're supposed to be doing, what he expects of them. And they've just been falling short, unfortunately, in regards to his expectations so far.
What do you think kind of does that? I've heard the NIL argument, and I can't bring myself to buy it. And it's not just because I'm a supporter of NIL. It's just when you're on the field, you don't think about those things, and you lose those things if you don't perform. But could it be a mixture of that? Is it just the overwhelming success that Alabama's had? They're losing respect for winning. Where do you attribute some of those shortfalls within this roster after 15 years of dominance?
Well, I think that it goes back to what Saban said last night about the warrior mentality of Will Anderson. Will Anderson, of course, didn't practice as much as he normally did last week, and then still came out there. He was clearly tired by the end of the game, but he was still in there almost every play, and they're doing his job. And I think that's while he exhibited great leadership qualities, and obviously, we're all impressed with Will Anderson and what he's done there. I think Saban wants to see that from everybody. I think Will Anderson, met the standard that Saban sets. Excuse me. Now going back to NIL, I believe that I don't think my heels are quite as dug in against that argument as yours are, but I don't think that's the primary concern here. Mm-hmm. With players, NIL, if anything, should serve as greater motivation to perform on the field because, yes, you might be making money, but if, like you just said, if you don't perform well, those lucrative sponsorships and deals are going to stop coming in. So you think that if anything, it would encourage greater effort from players. Of course, right now it's kind of the Wild West with NIL just because, we're still figuring things out. Players are still figuring out. Universities and coaches are still figuring things out. Heck, the NCAA is still figuring things out. It's kind of untested waters, the territory that we're going through right now with NIL. And, these players necessarily haven't been around long enough to see, if I don't perform as well, I might not get that sponsorship or that deal. So I don't think that all being said, I don't think that NIL is the primary concern, but it wouldn't surprise me if that does play a small factor in the grander scheme of things.
Joey, we've heard from Saban multiple times since before training camp started, really, and maybe even as far back as A-Day, if I can recall correctly. Bryce Young has been the star, but his counterparts have not been particularly the most helpful, whether it's been the receivers or the running backs or the offensive line, a mixture of any of them, one at a time, whatever the case may be. It never seems to be that this offense is clicking on all cylinders and is a full go with all 11 guys that are on the field. So I ask you, 3 games into the season, one real true test against a formidable Gators team. Where do you see the true shortcoming for this offense and the way that it's performed? I know that they're playing excellently. Don't take that the wrong way from me, but there's certainly a gap there that Alabama fans want to see filled.
Well, I think one of the biggest things is consistency. I think that Bryce Young has been one of, if not the only consistent player on offense so far this season. And Bryce Young can't win every game by himself. He needs to have dependable teammates, that he can rely on. The running game has been inconsistent. At wide receiver, there's been some flashes of solid play from Jamison Williams and John Mechie, but overall, Bryce hasn't been able to find that one dependable guy that he can rely on that's not going to drop a pass. Even Slade Bolden, dropped the touchdown pass, this past week. As far as the running game is concerned, there hasn't really been a back that is, emerged as the dominant running back. Yes, we have Brian Robinson, but at the same time with Brian Robinson, the reason he's getting the most yards is simply because he's giving the most carries. At least that's how I interpret it. And that's not a knock on Brian Robinson at all, but there needs to be a player in that running back, squad that does emerge, and there really hasn't been one. It's just overall, I think the biggest problem with this offense is just the inconsistencies from week to week. I mean, you can look at a guy like Trey Sanders, who performed really well against Mercer, but then evidently, didn't perform well enough in practice last week in order to warrant getting a single snap against Florida. And then now we have with Brian Robinson day to day right now with an injury, as they said last night, we're not really sure what it is. You have to think, okay, that brings Sanders back into the mix. And it's just things like that have happened multiple times this season, and we're only 3 games deep. And the bottom line, I think the biggest problem with this offense that it really needs to develop consistency in Bryce Young's supporting cast.
Saban said something interesting, the difference between the mentalities in the pro players and the college players. When you look on this offense, though, this is not the case for the defensive side of the ball. But on offense, there are coaches from the NFL ranks. You've got Bill O'Brien as the offensive coordinator. You've got, of course, the Doug Marrone, the former Jags coach. He's coaching the offensive line. There's been some problems on the offensive line. Do you think that maybe some of this just stems from those guys getting back into the college mentality of how to approach these players and try to get through to them in different ways than what they're kind of used to doing in the NFL?
Well, that's definitely possible. I wouldn't rule that out. Bill O'Brien is, still adjusting to his offense. Doug Marrone, as you mentioned him, is still adjusting to, playing, coaching at the college level. There's a lot of people heading into this season. The primary thing was the high turnover rate among players on offense. Obviously, you lost three very key offensive line members. You lost, of course, Mac Jones and Fonte Smith and Jalen Waddle. You lost a lot of those crucial elements. Najee Harris. You lost a lot of those crucial elements on offense, but people didn't really talk about, at least from my perspective, people really didn't talk about the turnover in coaching. And when there's a turnover in coaching, obviously there's a turnover in styles as well. Bill O'Brien's still trying to implement. He took a lot from Lane Kiffin, and Alabama's taken a lot from Lane Kiffin for years as far as the impact that he made on Alabama's style of offense in Tuscaloosa. But he's kind of O'Brien's trying to develop it into his own system, and that's going to take time. It's almost an entirely new team this year, and you have young players, coaches that are trying to get back into the swing of things, and so far it's resulted in 3 Alabama wins, but. I was on the All Things Bama podcast. We recorded that with Tyler Martin on Tuesday. Tyler, one of the questions he asked me was talking about, is it time, to hit the panic button, for Alabama football? And I'm like, this team is still 3-0. They're about to be 4-0 with Southern Miss, and I know Saban would probably tear me and you in for saying that, but let's be honest here. They're going to be 4-0 after Southern Miss. If they're not, then you can never have me on here ever again. But the Ole Miss game, obviously, will be some troubles, and they have a tough road trip to Texas A&M the next week. But if this team struggles against Southern Miss, obviously it's time to hit the panic button. But the team's not going to struggle. Ole Miss is scary, as is Texas A&M. But those teams have their own issues they need to work through, and I think this team is going to be just fine. I know a lot of Alabama fans are reaching for that panic button, but it's not quite that time just yet. This is a Florida team that is a top 15 team in the country, one of the harshest environments Alabama has seen since 2019, not just this season, but since 2019 due to the pandemic. And, there's a lot of external factors that you can't prepare for. And I don't think I'm already kind of going on a rant here, but I don't think it's time to hit that panic button just yet.
No, I think you're spot on. I think you're absolutely spot on. Joey Blackwell at Blackwell Sports on the Twitter account. Beat writer for Bama Central, the Sports Illustrated affiliate of the Alabama Crimson Tide. Joey, I don't know if you're a big film guy, but I'm sure you've heard about the performance of Henry To'oTo'o and Christian Harris in this football game. I've watched the game back twice now through the week, watched it this morning, and I still am just flabbergasted by the unwillingness to take on contact as linebackers and to avoid being blocked because you can't get off of blocks. We've preached about or going into the season, all throughout the offseason, I really hung my hat on this defense being so great, and a lot of that being because of the depth. Of course, you can't always just switch guys out, but when you start to see performances like that in big time games, is it time to I know this kind of leans on the panic button a little bit, but is it time to maybe look at some rotational situations with guys if they're not performing the way you expect them to?
I can agree with that. I mean, I did actually watch the film this week. I rewatched the game on Sunday, then watched the film on Tuesday, and Harris was one of the first things that stuck out to me because it seemed like he was if a player makes a bad read, if Christian Harris makes a bad read, that's understandable. But it seemed like every play he was either behind the play or it overcommitted or was like you said, avoiding contact. And the same for Henry To'oTo'o. That's something you definitely don't need from two players that are veterans on the defense that are expected to lead and lead by example, like Will Anderson did against Florida. I think that a lot of Alabama fans, might say, it's not time to possibly rotate yet. But a prime example, I think, of how it's worked out is let's think of Chris Allen, who got hurt and hasn't been able to play, and we've seen fantastic play from his replacement so far this year. Drew Sanders has done an incredible job, as has Dallas Turner, kind of rotating in and filling that out. So it's not the end of the world if you have to, start a rotation at a position to see who is, the better, the best option at that position. And I think this weekend at Southern Miss, we'll probably see that because this weekend is a prime, it's prime time to test out different players at different positions heading into what's about to be a brutal SEC stretch for Alabama.
No doubt about it. Sticking with the SEC, Florida, there's one of two ways they can let this game define them. They're either going to use it to really explode into the rest of their schedule. They've got Tennessee this week. That should be a pretty comfortable victory, and then they'll head to Kentucky. They can either use it to springboard them, or they can let it define them and feel like they're just not good enough to really reach the pinnacle of the SEC East and face Alabama again. How do you think that Dan Mullen's squad's going to be able to respond after this game?
Well, heading into the season, Florida had a lot of the same questions that Alabama did on offense. They had to replace Kyle Trask, the quarterback. They had to replace Kyle Pitts, the tight end. They had to replace a phenomenal wide receiver in Kadarius Toney. And after the Alabama game, a lot of people didn't think, including myself, that Florida would be able to show up like they did against Alabama. And if they're able to pull off that level of football every week, I think this Florida team's going to be just fine. It definitely makes the game against Georgia and Jacksonville a lot more interesting. It makes the race in the East a lot more interesting. I think that this team, obviously they still have Georgia looming on their schedule. And that's definitely going to be a test for them, but I don't think I think it's a winnable game for them against Georgia. And I think we're going to see either Georgia or Florida in Atlanta should Alabama make that far, which of course I believe they will. And I think that Florida definitely has the opportunity right now. If they can play like they did this past weekend every week, they definitely have a much bigger shot at being there than I would have said last Friday.
And on top of that, it won't be long they'll be able to utilize Anthony Richardson again. And against other teams, maybe not. Maybe we'll see how Georgia defends them, but they'll be able to get their playmakers involved. Damian Pierce, I know he had 2 touchdowns to get against Alabama, but 25 yards rushing wasn't much, and Jacob Copeland held to 1 catch and 10 yards. They're able to use their playmakers like they expect to. They can become a very dangerous football team. This weekend in Jerry World, Arkansas and Texas A&M. A&M's not a team that we really understand just yet. I mean, they lose Haynes King for the season. His replacement isn't playing bad, but again, A&M hasn't played anybody. It's very much the same case as Florida. Going into their biggest game of the season or to start the season, they've had a lot of preseason games where we really haven't learned a lot about them. Arkansas, on the other hand, though, they've dominated everybody, and one of the teams they've had to play was what we expected to be a pretty good Texas team. It seems a lot of folks, though, still want to lean towards the Aggies just based off of the history. But these Pigs, man, they might be for real. How do you see this one in Jerry World going?
Well, I was saying in the preseason that this is an Arkansas team that people don't need to sleep on, and I still stand by that. I think what Sam Pittman's built in Fayetteville, over the course of just a season and a handful of games is something impressive. I think that this Arkansas team, after what we saw against Texas, I think they're the real deal. Now, can they topple a team like Alabama? Well, that has yet to be seen, but they're going to keep building up momentum as they go along. I think the Texas victory gave them a lot of energy heading into a big matchup like this. If they can topple Texas A&M, I think that would definitely give them even more, give them a chip on their shoulder in a way. It'd be huge for the program. Looking on the other side of Texas A&M, with the loss of Haynes King, obviously they still need to work around that and see how things are going to go in respect to that. I don't think, it's terrible timing on their part, because I think this is going to be an Arkansas team that's going to come in there fired up and ready to go. And when you're still experimenting on offense to figure out who your number one guy at quarterback is with your starter out, that's going to be difficult. That being said, I think it's going to be a close game because Texas A&M will still be experimenting on offense. Texas A&M, even with Haynes King, is having a hard time scoring. But it's not that they've had a hard time scoring, but they've had a hard time scoring when they've had the chances. The Red Throne production hasn't been very well. But Texas A&M on defense has a very, very solid defense. I think that's one that's going to give Arkansas ultimately a lot of problems. I give Texas A&M the edge, but I think, like you said, a part of that is because of Aggie's history. But that being said, it wouldn't be surprising if Arkansas pulled off the upset, at least in my mind.
I mean, I'm taking the Pigs. The Pigs. I love them.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, I want to. My head is going Texas A&M. My heart's going Arkansas, and I have a really hard time ignoring my head sometimes.
No, I certainly feel that. Ole Miss, though, that's one where my head told me several weeks ago this was going to be a dangerous football team in the SEC West and could very well be the one true challenge with Alabama, despite the game being in Tuscaloosa. I predicted they'd be the second best team in the West. They have a real opportunity for the first time to be the best team in the West when they come to Alabama in 2 weeks' time. But right now, without looking ahead, Matt Corral is the Heisman front runner, and he's playing out of his mind. Lane Kiffin's doing exactly what you would expect him to do. He reloaded his offense with weapons, and they're moving the ball up and down the field. Do you think, though, overall, with the way that Ole Miss has grown, has the defense grown enough? Is the offense still at a place where it can just run the score on Alabama? How do you feel about the Rebels and how they've started their season, looking ahead a little bit with Alabama?
Well, I think because of that same, Lane Kiffin's done a great job, and Matt Corral's done an outstanding job as well. There's a reason he's the Heisman favorite right now. I think as far as their defense is developed, I think it's a better defense than Alabama saw last year, but I'm not sure if it's quite fully equipped to take on, an Alabama offense that we'll have learned and hopefully ironed out some kinks after the Southern Miss game, heading into next week and preparing for that. That being said, I think that Ole Miss's offense is fully developed and mature at this point. It took a couple of years, but they already had a solid offense last year. I mean, everybody remembers last year's Ole Miss game with Alabama and how back and forth it was until the fourth quarter and halfway through the third. But I think that it goes without saying at this point, this is Alabama's biggest game early on. We thought it might be Texas A&M, but I think this Ole Miss team is really going to test Alabama. What Lane Kiffin has done has been outstanding, and it's definitely going to be. I'm in my own mind, I'm hyping it up more than I hype the Florida game, just because of the potential that this Ole Miss team has, and I think Alabama ultimately will get the job done. But I've also said for a couple of years now, I think if Saban ever loses to an assistant coach, it's going to be Lane Kiffin, and what he's built this year looks like this could be the year. But I don't think they're ever going to have a better chance than they will this year. So, and I could be corrected next year, but that's in the future. They have a really outstanding opportunity this year to really get something done against Alabama, and it's I hate to look past the game this weekend, but it's really going to be a good one.
No, I'm right there with you. Ole Miss, this is probably the best shot that they're going to have. We talk about Alabama's vulnerability. It's not that Alabama's a bad football team. It's not that you should be fearful at all. I agree with you. There is no panic switch to be hit right now. But when you look across the landscape of the elite college football teams, this question is even more pressing than it was last week when I'm sure I asked you something similar. But it's really a clean slate at the top, and in the end, we've seen this kind of happen for Alabama before. But in the end, if it's a clean slate for Alabama and Alabama does drop one, hopefully they don't. But if that is the case, then maybe with the way things are so balanced at the top, maybe a few other teams could lose an important game that sends Alabama right back in, and they can take advantage of the playoffs. How do you feel about the way the top of the college football mountain is looking right now?
I think this season it's been thrilling so far, because it's almost as if a reset button was hit. We've seen winners turn into pretenders a lot. We've seen, Oregon's in the top 4 right now. Ohio State has a loss. LSU lost to UCLA, a UCLA team that just lost to Fresno State this past weekend. You're seeing a lot of shifting around. Arkansas beating Texas is another one. You're seeing a lot of, just because you're in the top 25 does not mean that you're safe by any means. And I think that's one of the biggest concerns for Alabama. It's like, okay, well, everything is shifting right now. And Alabama isn't they're still, like you said, a very great football team, but we're not quite sure yet if this is a typical Alabama team. And if Alabama were to lose to a team like Texas A&M or lose to a team like Ole Miss, that would just be further confirmation that reset button had been hit. I think Alabama will still make the playoff even if they do have one loss. But regardless, there's been a huge shift this year, and it's made for some very interesting football. As a fan of the sport of football, it's definitely been very interesting to sit back and watch. And, obviously, you don't want to see Alabama drop a game, but at the same time, if that should happen, there's no doubt it's definitely going to create some very interesting scenarios when you have so many teams in the top 10 that just seemingly can't stay undefeated.
Joey, I was going to skip this question, but your answer just makes it too good. I can't. The college football playoff vote has been postponed, and really, like, there's just the pushback on the 12. Some folks want 8, but at the end of the day, do you think that maybe this season is kind of proof positive why a 12-team playoff could feasibly work, and that now is probably the best time to go forward with it? Are these commissioners outthinking themselves a little bit on this one?
I think they are. Well, it's a tough question. I've always been a proponent for 8 teams. I think 8 teams is perfect, because once you get sat in a typical year, once you get sat outside of those top 8 teams, there's a pretty steep drop off. Mm-hmm. And I've always been a proponent of that. I think that might be why, maybe they're jumping the gun with 12 teams. I foresaw this back when they first announced that they were considering a 12-team playoff and the vote was going to be in September. I foresaw them pushing it back. And I think that with all of the disparity that we've seen in college football this year, teams that are normally really good falling short, and teams that are not, good programs but not top tier, being able to topple those teams. I think this is causing the commissioners to kind of step back and wanting to take a wider, broader look at how this season plays out and how it impacts, how many teams are going to make the playoff. I'm still for expansion, but I think it should be 8 teams. I think 12 teams is jumping the gun, but but once again, if you have those 12 teams, it does provide, you would think it would provide more exciting football. But when you have, a 12 team upsetting a 5 team in the first week, and then a 12 team getting crushed by a number 1 team the following week, I'm not really sure if that exactly contributes to exciting football to watch in the second week of the playoff.
We like it in round ball. That's all I'll say, Joey.
That's fair.
At Blackwell Sports, the beat writer for Alabama Crimson Tide football with Bama Central, the Sports Illustrated affiliate. Joey, man, I always appreciate your time. Always appreciate your analysis as well, man. I'll see you on Saturday.
Absolutely. Sounds good. Thank you, Jacob.
Absolutely. Joey Blackwell helping us out. We'll take a break, come back. 205-342-9904. Your thoughts, reactions to what Nick Saban had to say last night. We'll find a clip to play as well, something that I'm sure we'll get the conversation going about these running backs, and I'll clarify a little bit of what I was trying to say yesterday concerning the guy that wears number 21 in the backfield. That and more. Off the Edge, Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama sports.
By texting 64,000, you agree to receive recurring automated marketing messages from Babbel. Message and data rates may apply. No purchase required. Terms apply. Available at babbel.com/TNC.
We're planning a trip to Spain later this year.
But our Spanish is...
It's pretty bad.
When you learn a language, you want to actually use it. Babbel is designed with that goal in mind. Babbel's conversation-based method teaches you real-life words and phrases. And with Babbel's interactive, bite-sized lessons, you'll remember what you learned.
¿Cómo te llamas? ¿Cómo te llamas?
¿De dónde eres?
¿De dónde eres?
No matter your learning style or experience level, Babbel has lessons designed for you that will get you speaking quickly and confidently.
I tried learning Spanish before, but I couldn't stick with it until I found Babbel.
There's no easier way to learn another language.
Ahora hablamos español.
He just said, now we speak Spanish.
I can't wait to use our new language skills on our upcoming adventures.
Babbel, language for life. Celebrating 10 million subscriptions sold. Now try Babbel for free. Just text radio to 64,000 to start learning a new language today. That's radio to 64,000. RADIO to 64,000.
This is Renee.
Happy to be here.
She's not some influencer. She's more of a groundbreaker, turning her 4-acre lot into a little slice of heaven behind the wheel of a John Deere 1 Series tractor. Renee runs with us, because the most important job is the next one.
That's all I got.
Nothing runs like a Deere. Get a 1 Series tractor for just $99 per month at your John Deere dealer today. For additional cost information, please call toll-free 855-633-2315.
Dell's semi-annual sale is the perfect opportunity for a significant business upgrade. Save up to 45% on Dell computers built for business with Windows 10 Pro. Plus, enjoy special pricing on Dell docks, monitors, servers, and more, all with easy financing options through Dell Financial Services. Succeed anywhere with Windows 10 Pro. Speak to a Dell Technologies advisor today to find the right tech for your business with fast, free shipping. Call 877-ASK-DELL. That's 877-ASK-DELL.
Indeed helps you hire great people fast. Indeed delivers 4 times more hires than all other job sites combined, according to Talent Nest. Visit Indeed.com/credit.
I need tech that can make me as productive in my home office as I am at my office.
It's possible with Staples Connect. How about a PC that'll help me get the most out of my day and my budget? Staples Connect makes it possible with the tools you need to work from anywhere. And now get up to $200 off select PCs, like the Lenovo IdeaPad 5i with Intel i5 processor. Explore what's new at your local Staples or staplesconnect.com. Staples Connect, the working and learning store. Ends 10/17. In-store only. Limit 2.
If you're in HR, you're probably wearing a lot of hats. Recruiter, team builder, trainer, mediator, policymaker, and of course, paper pusher. But not anymore. Bamboo HR is the #1 HR software for small and medium businesses. It manages all your employee data easily and automates countless tasks so you can focus on people, not paperwork. Bamboo HR frees you from spreadsheets so you can do your real job, creating a great place to work. If the data shuffle and paperwork mountain have you ready to hang up all your hats, you're ready for Bamboo. If you handle HR records and paperwork, Bamboo HR is a dream. Let us free up your time and put your days of pushing paperwork behind you so you can focus on the people and making your company a great place to work for everyone. Try PC Magazine's top pick for HR software free today. Just go to bamboohr.com/panda. This is a limited offer only available to radio listeners at bamboohr.com/panda. That's bamboohr.com/panda.
Tide 100.9 Tuscaloosa weather.
But a beautiful day today. Nothing but sunshine. The humidity stays low. Tuscaloosa's high 75. Cool again tonight. Clear with the low at 50. Then for tomorrow and Saturday, the sky's sunny both days. The high tomorrow 80. Saturday's high at 83. I'm James Spann on the ABC 3340 Weather Center on Tide 100.9. It's 70 degrees in Tuscaloosa.
You're listening to Off the Edge on Tide 100.9.
We're back here on Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama sports. Off the Edge. Jacob Harrison here with you. Joe Gaither behind the board. Michael Bronner helping out. Let's hear from Nick Saban. He got pretty fired up about the running backs. I think he got fired up for a different reason. But at the end of the day, you know, it harkens back to just because a guy plays in one game doesn't mean he's going to get snaps in the next. This running back committee is what it is. Whoever's got the hot hand. And I argue Jace McClellan's got the hot hand, but let's hear what Nick Saban got so fired up about. This is Nick Saban talking about his running backs last night.
B-Rob played really well in the game, and Jace really played really well in the game. So, you know, it's not like I sit there and say everybody's going to play this many plays. When it comes to running backs, whoever's playing well and has a hot hand, that's who we're going to play. It's how it's always been around here. You know, we've had some really good backs in the past that didn't play in games that were third guys because the other two guys were rolling and playing good. So, there was no plan to play him or not to play him. It's just the way the game worked out.
And that's completely understandable. Najee Harris has been in that spot, right? Remember Damian Harris and Josh Jacobs? They were playing just fine ahead of Najee Harris, and Najee couldn't get on the field. So it happens, right? And I feel like Trey Sanders, a big part of him not playing in the game had a lot to do with the fact that he's not as good as a pass blocker as the other two guys are. And both of those guys were playing well, like Saban said. But I want to clarify, yesterday, it was a little bit about Jace McClellan, wanting to get more reps for Jace McClellan. I want to see him on the field more. You can utilize different running backs in different ways, right? And I want to kind of send you to New Orleans over the past 4 years and the way that their running game has worked with Latavius Murray and Alvin Kamara. Jace McClellan's not Alvin Kamara now. Don't misconstrue this. He's not as fast. He's not as agile, but he is as usable in the open field. Where he's made his bread has been in the open field on swings and screens and subsequently in scores. He knows what he's doing with the ball in his hands in the open field, right? So use him on those outside zones and use him in the passing game a little bit more, and then continue to pound the rock up the middle with Brian Robinson. I think that that's something that I would like to see in the offense. Now, I don't call the plays, and I'm just a radio guy, but from what I see out of the skill set that this team has, let's go in that direction. I think it works pretty well. Let's jump out to the phone lines. George, man, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm good. How you doing?
Doing all right.
Yeah, just my comments on what I've seen, and I've been following Alabama football since 1960. Last week, what we're comparing this team to is what we saw last year, basically with the offense. Last year, you had, Heisman Trophy winner, Outland Trophy winner, Goat Walker winner. I mean, you had stars at every position that not only were stars, but they were also very experienced. Mm-hmm. And last year, also, we did not play in a hostile environment. So, communication was much, much more easy. This year, we got a young offense. We got an inexperienced offensive line, inexperienced receivers, inexperienced quarterback. And we're also playing in an environment, and I was at the Florida game in 2011, and that field, I mean, it's extremely, extremely loud. And I was talking to some of my friends who went this past weekend, and they says, George, compared to what it was in 2011, turning up about 30%. So you're dealing with a communication problem, and also an offense that has not gotten gelled and has chemistry. And you made a point also that the players and the coaches have not had enough time to gel and have chemistry. And I think that after this past week, you'll see a little bit better offense, and the defense. I have no reason why it, missed tackles and that sort of thing, but I think that, you're going to see a little bit better there, because I think Coach Saban also said maybe we've lost a little respect for winning of what it takes. So I'm not ready to throw in the towel, but there were some reasons to where the team was not quite looking as good. And plus, Florida had a lot better talent than what I thought they were, much more. And, I think in running backs, everybody's saying that our guys aren't like Najee, but also remember when you saw them run last year, you didn't have as much traffic within a yard and a half of the line. So you've got a little bit quicker and more momentum before you started seeing traffic. And once that offensive line gels, and it usually takes 2 or 3 games. Remember 2 years ago, we had someone hurt, and it took a couple of games for the offensive line to gel. And that's just my kind of take on what we've seen so far. And I really appreciate you taking my call.
Absolutely, George, man. I don't think George could be any more correct. I mean, he's spot on, 110% spot on in everything that he says, because offensive lines take time to gel. That's proof in the pudding. You watch them individually, they're playing well. As a cohesive unit, not necessarily, right? But when you look at 3 of the returning starters are all, or 2 of the 3 returning starters playing new positions. Now, Evan Neal goes to his most natural position. He's playing just fine. Chris Owens, though, moves from center to right tackle. That's a huge shift, especially when he went into the season thinking he'd be the center. It takes time. And every problem that we see with the Alabama Crimson Tide right now are problems that we have seen corrected over the course of a season. Even last year, George is absolutely right. We just forget about the Ole Miss game last year, where that defense played horrendously. I mean, like actually bad. And then it turned out to be one of the best defenses we had seen in a while. All it takes is time. All it takes is good coaching, and all it takes is preparation from the players. The one thing I think we're waiting on is the players. I think Nick Saban's kind of spoken as much as he can within the press conferences. But if he's fired up, I'm fired up. Let's go kill the Golden Eagles, man. Let's do this thing. We got just a few days to go, and we'll be under the lights in Bryant-Denny Stadium. We'll have a lot of fun. Download the Tide 100.9 app if you can't make it into the stadium. And even if you do, you can get the call from Eli Gold as well. Plenty of content coming your way on Tide109.com. I'll let you know some of the players to keep an eye out for that'll be wearing the gold and black from Hattiesburg. The Jay Barker Show is coming up next. Ryan Fowler, hey, coach tonight, after Tide tonight as well. Keep it locked in. Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama sports.
Thank you for listening to Off the Edge.
Can't tell you how proud I am of our players, our team.
Join us every Monday from 8 to 10 and Friday from 7 to 9 p.m. on Tide 100.9 and the